It's going to be a wild day today. I don't want you to miss any of this. You know, there's breaking news. And this is like, John Solomon is like the best reporter on this stuff. The abuse of power, Kash Patel, everybody's been frustrated with what's Kash doing? How come there's no arrests? He's building a blockbuster case. I'm going to break some news out for you here with John Solomon on a criminal case in one operation. He's going to be declassifying 4 separate violations of the law that the FBI was part of. And he's coming in as the director of the FBI to expose it. I want to tell you what's going to be coming down. Also, President Trump, what are his options regarding creating peace out of Iran? I'm going to share with you the 3 objectives he's got that he's repeated. And where are we now? Is there a Venezuela option? Is there a way you could put a bad hombre involved in running the country but not have it be a cleric? That might be what Trump's going for. But the reality is, you're going to hear all that in the news in this brief half hour. But I got something here I got to tell you about. Somebody wrote something describing this trip I want to do. For many of you, we live in the stress of this war zone, and it's always something going on. But I've been in a lot of places around the world. But I'm going to tell you that Alaska has a way on a cruise of slowing everything down. It's the glaciers, it's the water. Annabelle just loves it. Because, you know, you see the whales surface, eagles flying overhead all over the place, and suddenly you just hear God more clearly. I want you to go to lancewallnau.com/cruise and see if you want to join me, Annabelle and my friends, July 19th through 26th. It's going to slow everything down, and we're going to have a time with God moving upon the waters. Go to lancewallnau.com/cruise and at least get the information. And join me for today's wild show. Well, welcome back to the Lance Wallnau Show. Now, what's happening with Iran is kind of, it's important to get a perspective on this because you have, in the blizzard of spin, we have so many Americans, so many on the left that want to constantly, it's a strange thing, no matter what Trump does. I mean, if he said, I want everyone to breathe, I think the left would say we're going to hold our breath. They just are opposite everything he does. But in this case with Iran, here's the 3 objectives the president has said that are important for us to get. First, he wants to remove the nuclear threat to the United States. That's MAGA. That's the first thing. That region is critical to the flow of energy. 20% of the global flow of oil and gas comes through the Strait of Hormuz. So it's important that is a stable territory. So you can't be a threat to your neighbors is the second part. That includes funding Hezbollah and funding Hamas and funding the Houthis in Yemen. And so Trump is saying he wants to establish the fact that he's eliminating the threat to the United States, a threat to Iran's neighbors. And then the third part is the most challenging, a threat to their own people. They've killed 30,000 protesters. And what's strange is you don't hear any campus uprisings. You don't have any screeching protests going on about the slaughtering of the innocent in Iran. But that's the hard part right now, which is what do you do with a fanatical regime of clerics if they're in charge of the infrastructure of the country? Then to leave is to just allow them to seethe in their resentment and further work on trying to get what they were deprived of, which is the capacity to strike their enemies. You have a terrorist state that may be emasculated in terms of its military capacity right now. But with the flow of money coming in through the vast oil reserves of Iran, it enables them to have the wherewithal to be able to do the wicked work or deeds they want to do, perhaps to pay for nuclear weapons to use against the United States. And so the third part is the challenging part. How do you defang a regime but leave it in power so that it can refang later? And Trump has said he doesn't want this to be something where we've got to go back in there in 5 years because he doesn't trust that America will have a president that will go back in there and protect the country and the region. So The clerics have, as you've heard, they've already appointed Khomeini's son as the next leader. But the U.S. president, as Israel says, his hands are already stained with bloodshed. He's committed to the same ideology as his father. So President Trump, when asked about Mojtaba Khomeini as the next appointed supreme leader, his answer, his cryptic and pregnant with meaning answer is, "I'm not happy with it." When asked, what does that mean? What's he going to do? He says, "I'm not going to tell you. I'll just tell you I'm not happy with him." Now, Israel has been given permission through the United States to take out regime structure, meaning they have the freedom to go take out the next level. It's interesting that the new replacement hasn't been seen in public yet. Speculation is that he already may have been he may have been injured in one of the strikes. What Israel and the United States are doing is they're separating the regular military from the royal militia or army that serves the clerics. And what Trump is trying to do is he's trying to encourage the leadership that are in the military to make a break at some point with the fanatical suicide death wish of the clerical regime. By continuing to strike them, Trump is hoping that at some point he'll end up with the Venezuela option. And here's the Venezuela option. It would be nice if you could have the overthrow of the regime and elections happening, and the people decide who their new leader is, and it's a leader that will work with the United States and with the other leaders in an embracing of the Abraham Accords and an end to the terror threat. That's kind of the pie in the sky hope. The Venezuela option is, and you remember this, and I said, in my limited capacity here behind a desk, I said, the whole Maduro team are corrupt. They work with narco traffickers. They're working with the infrastructure of the cartels, just as they do in Mexico. So you can't work with the vice president. She's part and parcel of the operation. But Trump's pragmatism on this is, I think if you send the message that we'll take you out too if you don't behave, he put in the vice president who's working with the U.S. to give Trump what he wants with American control of the oil and keeping an eye on the suppression of freedom that is there, so that they are aware of the fact that they're under surveillance from the U.S. The Venezuela option is you don't raise up a perfect democracy to replace the clerical regime, but you raise up a stabilizing state where the new military leadership says, we'll take care of our own mess over here, but for the time being, we're in complete agreement with the no nukes. We're not going to have a ballistic program. We need to build infrastructure. We need to get our economy back again, and we need to stabilize our nation, and let them deal with the clerics' decision or aspiration to re-seize power. That's the Venezuela option. It's not yet clear at all that there's an infrastructure that's going to do that. So Trump is not saying what he's going to do next, but I do not believe he or Israel are going to allow the fanatical clerical regime to simply be pushed back in terms of military capacity and come back into power with a vengeance, and they will suppress the people. Now, how do you do this without boots on the ground? You can only bomb so much. You guys understand that? And this is where I listen to some of the experts that understand the tactical domain, like Eric Prince says, you're going to have a couple thousand military competent people who will be there in order to help bring, let's say, a domestic uprising to the point where the people have the ability to not be mowed down in the streets by the regime. So they can't have the people coming out and trying to protest again and just having them wiped out by the next fanatical cleric. So this is a stage where I'm going to tell you, only the wisdom of God and the intervention of the Almighty can find the third solution that will allow Israel to say, we really don't want to continue to have to live in this state of constantly running into bunkers and being rained on by missiles. They want to have peace. But how to have peace with a fanatical regime that is bent on revenge, that stays in power, is not really an option. So I think they're going to keep taking out the next cleric and the next cleric till they get the message. Trump says he has to approve of who that next leader is because he doesn't plan on having to keep doing this, or hoping that America has leadership that'll do it in the future. Changing the man at the top does not change the regime, says Israel's UN ambassador Danny Danon. He added, the new leader, unfortunately, is more of the same ideology, the same radical ideas, and anyone who will promote those radical ideas against us, we will target them and find them. Danon said the people of Iran should rise up to choose their next leader and added, we will have to create the conditions for them, and that's what we're doing now. Perpetual degrading of the Republican Guard, and that is done by targeting directly the Republican Guard. So you see, they have a bit of a challenge here because that Venezuela style of solution can only happen if there are leaders that are willing to break. And right now we don't have the fault line. Trump did say something rather cryptic, though. He said, I have someone in mind. I guarantee that Mossad and the CIA have some Iranian leaders that are being protected on the target list. I was told, I listened to one podcast, which from the intelligence community, former intel guys said that there's a list of don't touch, meaning there's at least 5 individuals that Israel has to be very careful not to target when they're doing these, 10 or 15 or 20 leaders at a time. Make sure that these people aren't there because they have some that are willing to work with the United States, providing there's a sufficient degrading of the Republican Guard. So there's people there. Getting there, Israel says we don't see anyone who can replace the regime, but I'm not sure it's in our highest interest to fight until the regime is toppled because nobody wants a never-ending story. There's the problem. How do you topple a regime that controls all the internal structure and there's no early signs of an internal rift? You got the Kurds you hear about. I always liked the Kurds because the Kurds protected the Christians when ISIS came in. But as is true in these things, it's complicated. Turkey, Erdogan, is afraid of the Kurds because the Kurds, adding territory, they occupy about 15% of the population of Iran. If they establish their own state within Iran, then they have autonomy and they have territory, something they've always wanted. But that could produce a civil war with the Persian population of Iran, 60%. Trump does not want a civil war, nor does he want Turkey coming in and getting involved because they're threatened by an armed Kurdistan, or the Kurds. See how this situation gets a little complicated. There's at least 4 ethnicities that make up Iran, and they actually speak 4 different languages, but the majority, the ones we're concerned about, are the Iranian Persians, who are 60% of the country. They're the ones that have to mount the stable regime change. And that they lost 30,000 of their protesters because they had no weapons to defend themselves. And Iran brought in from Iraq and from Syria various bad acts. Remember, they have the Houthis and they have Hezbollah and they have Hamas, and they just put them on the streets to mow down the citizens. So it's at this point we pray. Lord, I pray in Jesus' name that your hand will come down and you'll hear the prayer of the Christians in Iran. 20% of the country are Christians, I'm told. 15% at least. They're the largest group that is not represented yet in the data, but we know a great revival is happening in Iran. They burned down like 200 mosques. They don't want the clerical regime, but I pray, Lord, that your hand will come down and provide a stable change in Iran, that you remember the blood of those who have died and the martyrs whose voices are crying out to you. Let your hand come down on Iran and bring us a period of stability and peace. In Jesus' name, amen. We'll be right back.
There's something about Alaska that slows everything down. The mountains rise out of the water. Glaciers move in the distance.
And suddenly the noise you've been living in gets quiet enough that you can find peace again.
July of 2026, sail from Seattle through the breathtaking passages of Alaska with Lance Wallnau. Along the way, we'll experience Juneau, Sitka, Ketchikan, and Victoria, while stepping into powerful times of teaching, worship, and conversations that bring clarity for the season we're living in. You can explore the entire experience right now at lancewallnau.com/cruise.
Hey, I wanted to interrupt this for a moment because people keep saying, Lance, you were in my neighborhood. I didn't even know you were here. I'm going to be in Boise, Idaho, March 12th at 7 p.m. at the Awakened Church doing a Flashpoint. This will be a big Flashpoint event. But if you're in Boise, Idaho, or anywhere near, we'll be there March 12th and 13th, actually, with Flashpoint. And I'll be there Thursday at 7 p.m. for sure. Then I'm flying back to Elevate Prophetic Conference in Dallas, Texas, at the Shepherd's House. So check out the Shepherd's House Saturday, March 14th at 9 a.m. And I'll see you there. God bless. There are 4 separate FBI organized illegal operations that came against Donald Trump and his supporters. Under Biden's administration, with Christopher Wray, they were authorized illegally to go after Trump, to go after Turning Point, to go after America First policies, to go after anyone who was actually working with and supporting Trump's MAGA movement. This is horrifying, and I know many of you are frustrated. I read a lot of your comments about why isn't Pam Bondi doing something? Why is there no one being arrested? Because you know these things happen. Operation Crossfire Hurricane goes back to the fake Russian dossier story. But there's Operation Round River, Plasmic Echo, and Arctic Frost. All of these were 4 separate cases where the FBI was weaponized to go after and try to find something, like Stalin, to try to find something to lock up and put people in jail. You know they put Bannon in prison. They put Peter Navarro in prison. They wouldn't stop, frankly, to put me in prison. They'll go after all of us if they can regain power, because they make a targeted enemies list of anyone in their demonically twisted brain that was supporting Donald Trump and the agenda to make America great. So I want you to take a look at John Solomon breaking the story with Bannon on War Room, and I'll interrupt it at one point to show you something. Go ahead.
Trump targeted by 4 FBI codenamed counterintelligence probes that has snared hundreds of Americans. This, sir, is what I refer to as a bombshell. Can you walk us through it? We got about 2 or 3 minutes here. Yeah. We're holding you through the break. This is pretty much a bombshell.
You basically had 4 code-named investigations: Crossfire Hurricane, Plasmic Echo, Round River, and Arctic Frost. And what they did is they basically continuously treated the man twice elected by the American people as president as a counterintelligence threat, from July of 2016, when Crossfire opened up, to January 2025, when the president was sworn in his second inauguration. To do that, they had to penetrate the privacy.
Hang on. Full stop. Hit rewind on that. That in and of itself is shocking. Just hit rewind on that whole thing.
Yeah, the president, the FBI treated the president of the United States, a man twice elected president by the American people, as a continuous national security threat from July of 2016, in the middle of his first campaign, to January 2025, when he was sworn in for his second inauguration. Each of these investigations had code names, but at the end of the day, what they were was an effort to get Donald Trump, and it swept up hundreds of Americans: Charlie Kirk and his group, and Rudy Giuliani and his legal work, and Joe DeGenevieve and Victoria Tensing, many other people, all swept up in an effort to find some dirt that they could hang on the president's house. And I think when you look at it from that 30,000-foot perspective, you have one of the clearest pictures of what looks to be a conspiracy to deprive certain Americans of their civil liberties, much like what the Justice Department brought against the Ku Klux Klan and corrupt police departments back in the 1960s in the civil rights era. You now have a new version of it in 2026, which looks at the FBI and associated intelligence agencies and government agencies as potentially depriving the civil rights of President Trump and those around him. And by the way, Harmeet Dillon is quoted in the story. She's the Assistant Attorney General for Civil Rights, saying exactly that in the story today.
All right, hold it for a second there. This operation that targeted Charlie Kirk, you see, most people don't realize the tears he was crying that night, he said it, when Trump won, was tears of relief because he was told that he would end up like Bannon or like the others. His operation, Turning Point, would come under the scrutiny and destructive apparatus of the Department of Justice in order to break him down or lock him up as a leader in the conservative movement. That's how wicked and dangerous these people are. Arctic Frost probe targeted 400 conservative groups. I'm not even sure who they all are. I'm sure I know who most of them are. Individuals associated with Trump, according to evidence recently released by the Senate Judiciary Committee. And I'm saying, well, and you're saying, well, what's Kash Patel doing? Get rid of him. We have Pam Bondi. Get rid of her. Well, listen to this. It's buried in the article here, but most of the files on Arctic Frost and Plasmic Echo, and I'll tell you about that one in a minute, and Round River, were buried and hidden from FBI Director Kash Patel's view when he arrived. They were known as prohibited access files. I didn't know that the director of the FBI isn't allowed to see all the files in the FBI. Did you know that? How about that? And it's a tactic that was used during the Wray era of the FBI to shield from view politically sensitive cases inside the Bureau's case management system, which is known as the Sentinel. The Sentinel was guarding the dark deeds of the Wray administration over the FBI. That left only certain official files that were in existence. Often in hidden files and in secure storage areas was the sensitive, compartmentalized, separated little memos that you had to put together, like one of those cork boards with strings attached to all the characters to create the story. And these are called SCIFs, Sensitive Compartmented Information Facilities, SCIF. Patel assigned a small team of agents to hunt for the files and uncover these abuses. And he's been assisted greatly by a handful of senior executives who can navigate and find well-hidden evidence, which means a couple of whistleblowers are saying, I know where the bodies are buried, let me help you find them. But in a strange development, complicating this effort of the Bureau, they lost the one man who produced much of the most explosive evidence to Congress over the last year. And that's the Congressional Affairs Office Chief Counsel, Marshall Yates, who for some reason announced he's stepping down. Well, this is the time we need you, Marshall. Why is he stepping down? I don't know. But Deputy Director Andrew Bailey has been taking the lead in organizing the approach going forward. But he ruffled feathers internally and in Congress with comments that some took to suggest he was going to slow the amount of damaging information being sent to Congress to thwart demands to fire agents who were involved in abusive investigations. We don't want Deputy Director Andrew Bailey to in any way slow the amount of damaging information, do we? That fires agents that are involved with these four plots to lock up conservatives. I think we ought to find out who they are. So, man, I understand the frustration in our base, but you can't unplug, because we got a president who fights. And boy, you got one guy on top of this thing who will say, get me that information. What's going on? How come we're not seeing any arrests? He is not interested in covering up the activity that went on that investigated Mar-a-Lago, for instance. So let me just go back and talk about this for a second, because it's too important to skip over. President Donald Trump and his supporters were targeted by 4 consecutive FBI codenamed counterintelligence investigations. And they were Crossfire Hurricane, which was the one that Brennan was involved with. Now, what's happening there that I think is interesting is that there is the documents that misled Congress, claiming that the discredited anti-Trump Steele dossier was not used in the 2017 Intelligence Community Assessment on Russian meddling. The reality is Brennan lied to Congress, and he lied about whether or not Crossfire Hurricane, which was planted and developed by Hillary Clinton and the Perkins-Coie team with other characters in the intelligence community in Great Britain, by the way, in order to set up the fake narrative that Trump was colluding with Russia. Well, evidently those documents were used as a pretext for their Russian collusion argument, and Brennan did it under the direction of Obama. Now, because of the statute of limitations, Brennan felt that, well, by the time they get to this and all the election cycles, I'll be clear. Remember, he was a former CIA director himself, so he knows how to play the intelligence game. But you see, when it comes to certain types of crimes like this, a conspiracy crime doesn't have a statute of limitations to protect you. So they're setting him up in Florida. Why Florida? Because Plasmic Echo was the investigation that took illegally classified documents, where Trump was accused of taking documents to Mar-a-Lago after his term was already up. Remember that? They went through Melania's underwear and went through all that. FBI agents believed it did not meet legal standards for a search warrant, but they still went ahead and did it. And so since that is connected to the Rays going to Mar-a-Lago, Florida becomes a location where they can do some trials, not D.C., where they're guaranteed to always get out of jail free because they're 90% Democrat-aligned juries in D.C. Does that make sense to you? All right, for those of you that take prayer serious, I want you to remember these 4 names. We got to pray that there's full exposure. Crossfire Hurricane, we're not going to forget the fact that Russian collusion allegations that literally kneecapped President Trump's first term in office, resulting in impeachment efforts, that it's now being revealed that was actually an Obama White House authorized and John Brennan executed misinformation ploy using the government and its intelligence agencies and lackeys in the Democrat Party to try to pull the president elected by you out of office. That has to be dealt with. Arctic Frost Probe, that was the second one, that targeted nearly 400 conservative groups and any individual who supported Trump. And that has to be exposed. You don't go after kids on campuses that are preaching or talking about conservative values. Operation Plasmic Echo, that's the one we know least about, is the investigation that explored whether Trump illegally took classified documents to Mar-a-Lago. It was determined that there was no evidence, but they wanted to have the raid, and they wanted to psychologically hold a gun to Trump's head. Remember that gun's drawn going through his compound there, going to his home? And so that was overruled by the DOJ, according to a bombshell revelation recently from Kash Patel. We continue to pass versions back and forth after our pause and concerned about probable cause for any of the locations outlined. An agent wrote to the team, "What is the guidance for continuing to work on this document without any new information? Like, why are we doing this?" Didn't matter. The Biden White House had direct links with Merrick Garland. Go raid the man's house. And then they put documents out on the floor that were fake documents for a photo op to show, aha, look at what Trump has here. That has to be dealt with. And then Operation Round River, and that may prove to be the least known and most troubling of all. It's a counterintelligence probe targeting the Trump universe. At present, it's mostly classified. Recently discovered, agents only recently discovered the opening memo and files for the probe which was started in the Bureau's Pittsburgh field office, FBI field office, by targeting Trump lawyer to take out Rudy Giuliani for his efforts to expose Hunter Biden and Joe Biden's corruption in Ukraine, and any effort to expose Biden family corruption. That was now Rudy's been bankrupted, had his law license taken, and they're still trying to lock him up. All because he was targeted by the government for exposing Biden's involvement in Ukraine. And in that very case, reporters and lawmakers, movie makers, and lawyers who made certain allegations or raised questions about Biden's dealings in Ukraine may have been assessed to be national security threats, which meant that they were under private investigation to find. This is when the government comes after you for trying to expose its own corruption, folks. I want you to know about this because we have to pray for the continued exposure of these and courageous whistleblowers working with Cash and Bondi. I believe they're under pressure from Donald Trump himself. Don't fall into the narrative of some weird, bizarre conspiracy theory that Trump's covering it up. Trump wants every layer of this exposed because they came after him and they came after his people. And so, on that cheery note, I'm going to let the broadcast close, and we're going to see you again tomorrow.
Did you enjoy this latest episode? Please remember to share it with your friends, because the more knowledge you have, the better equipped you are to navigate the world.